I was never a fan of corporate parties. All that pretend friendliness between colleagues, awkward conversations with the bosses, and of course, the inevitable consumption of alcohol. But this time I decided that a little drink wouldn't hurt me. God, how wrong I was. The evening started quite ordinarily. Our company had rented a small restaurant in the city center. I arrived among the first, greeted my colleagues, and immediately headed to the bar. "Jack and Coke, please," I asked the bartender. "Starting early, Mike?" I heard Sarah's voice, our HR manager. "Well, someone has to warm up this party," I smiled in response. The first hour passed relatively calmly. I chatted with colleagues, discussed the latest office gossip, and tried not to think about my wife waiting at home with her usual complaints. Our marriage had been falling apart lately, and I used every opportunity to stay late at work or go out for drinks with friends. "Hey, Mike!" Tom, my friend from the sales department, called out. "Let's play darts? The loser drinks a shot of tequila." "You know I'm a pro at this," I smirked, heading towards the target. We played 3 rounds. I won 2 of them, but still joined Tom in drinking tequila. My head started to pleasantly spin, and I felt the tension of the past few weeks slowly releasing me. Suddenly, I noticed a familiar figure entering the restaurant. My heart skipped a beat. It was Linda, my wife's mother. "What the hell is she doing here?" "Mike, darling," she exclaimed, noticing me. "What a surprise! I didn't know you'd be here too." "Linda?" I tried to hide my surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I was consulting your company on the design of the new office, remember? They invited me to the party as a thank you." Damn, I had completely forgotten about that. Linda was a well-known interior designer, and our boss had hired her to redesign the office. Of course, I mumbled. "Would you like a drink?" "With pleasure," she replied. "A glass of champagne, please." I ordered her champagne and another Jack and Coke for myself. We started talking, and I was surprised to find that chatting with Linda was actually quite pleasant. She told funny stories about her clients, and I shared office anecdotes. Time flew by unnoticed. I continued drinking, now not counting the glasses. Linda kept up too. At some point, we found ourselves on the dance floor, moving to the rhythms of the 80s. "You're a great dancer, Mike!" Linda shouted through the music. "My daughter doesn't appreciate you!" These words somehow struck a chord with me. I really had been feeling underappreciated lately. Maybe that's why I kept drinking, as if trying to drown my problems in alcohol. The last thing I remember is Linda and I laughing about something sitting at the bar. She put her hand on my shoulder, and I felt a strange warmth. And then darkness fell. The first thing I felt when I opened my eyes was a hellish headache. The sunlight breaking through the poorly drawn curtains cut my eyes like a knife. I groaned and tried to turn, but immediately froze. Something was wrong. This wasn't my bed. And not my room. "What the hell?" I mumbled, trying to focus my gaze. Slowly, very slowly, it began to dawn on me where I was. It was a hotel room. But how did I end up here? The last thing I remembered was the corporate party, drinks, dancing, and then I heard it, quiet but distinct breathing next to me. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly turned my head and felt the blood drain from my face. Next to me, on the same bed, lay Linda, my mother-in-law, and apparently she was naked. "Oh, God," I whispered, feeling nausea rising in my throat. I carefully lifted the blanket and was horrified to find that I was completely undressed too. Our clothes were scattered all over the room, my tie on the chandelier, her blouse on a chair, my pants somewhere by the door. No, I muttered, trying to get out of bed without waking Linda. This can't be true. But it was true. And the more I looked around, the clearer it became that something irreparable had happened. On the bedside table stood an empty bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. I stumbled to the bathroom, feeling nausea rising in my throat. Looking in the mirror, I saw my pale, puffy face and traces of lipstick on my neck, the same bright red lipstick that Linda always wore. "Mike!" I heard a sleepy voice from the room. "Are you here?" I froze, not knowing what to do. How would I look her in the eyes? How would I explain all this? And most importantly, how would I explain this to my wife? "Yes," I forced out. "I'll be out in a minute." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I needed to somehow figure out the situation. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Maybe we just fell asleep in the same bed. But deep inside, I knew these were just pathetic attempts at self-deception. Coming out of the bathroom, I saw Linda sitting on the bed. She was holding her head and looked no less confused than I did. "Mike," she said quietly, what happened last night?" I shook my head, feeling nausea rising in my throat again. I don't know, Linda. I don't remember anything after the bar." We looked at each other in complete silence, realizing the horror of the situation. My mother-in-law, my wife's mother, how could we have allowed this? We need to figure this out," Linda finally said, "and decide what to do next." I nodded, unable to utter a word. Only one thought was spinning in my head. What have I done? The next hour passed as if in a fog. Linda and I silently gathered our things, trying not to look at each other. Each found item of clothing was like a new accusation, like another piece of evidence of our misconduct. "We need to talk," Linda finally said when we were both dressed. "But not here. Let's find some quiet cafe." I nodded silently. We left the hotel, trying not to attract attention. Outside, it was a clear morning. People were rushing to work. Life was going on as usual. But for us, the world had turned upside down. We found a small cafe a couple of blocks from the hotel. After ordering coffee, we sat at a far table. "So," Linda began, nervously twirling the cup in her hands, "what's the last thing you remember?" I rubbed my temples, trying to gather my thoughts. "We were at the bar. I think we were drinking champagne, then a blank." Linda nodded. "I don't remember much either. But Mike, we need to figure out what happened. And most importantly, decide what to do next." "Maybe nothing happened," I asked hopefully. "Maybe we just fell asleep?" Linda looked at me with sympathy. "Mike, we both know that's unlikely, but you're right. We need facts. Let's think. Who else was at the party? Who could have seen us?" We started making a list. Tom from sales, Sarah from HR, our boss, Mr. Johnson. But none of them seemed like a suitable witness. Who would believe that my mother-in-law and I couldn't even mentally pronounce it? "Listen," Linda suddenly said. "What if we call the hotel? Maybe someone from the staff saw us." It was a good idea. I dialed the hotel number and, trying to speak as calmly as possible, asked about last night. The receptionist was surprisingly responsive. "Yes, sir, I remember you. You came around midnight with a lady. You both were, let's say, in high spirits. You ordered champagne to the room." My heart sank. So we really did come there together and ordered champagne. "Thank you," I mumbled and hung up. Linda was looking at me anxiously. What did she say? I relayed the receptionist's words to her. Linda turned pale. "God, Mike, what have we done? How will we explain this to Carol?" Carol, my wife, her daughter, I felt a lump forming in my throat. "Maybe we shouldn't tell her," I suggested. "If we ourselves don't really remember, maybe—" "No," Linda said firmly. "We can't hide this. It will destroy us from the inside. We have to tell the truth." I knew she was right. But the thought of confessing everything to Carol made me physically ill. "Give me time," I asked. "At least a couple of days. I need to prepare." Linda reluctantly agreed. We agreed not to communicate during these days to avoid suspicion. Leaving the cafe, I felt completely lost. How would I look Carol in the eyes? How would I live with this burden on my conscience? And most importantly, did Linda and I really? These questions haunted me all day. I mechanically did my work, answered calls, sent emails, but inside me, a hurricane of emotions was raging. Returning home, I saw Carol in the kitchen. She was preparing dinner, humming something, such an ordinary, homely scene, and it made me feel even worse. "Hi, honey," she smiled. "How was the corporate party?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Fine," I mumbled. "Nothing special." "Was Mom there?" Carol asked casually. She said she was invited. I almost choked. "Yes, she was there. We chatted a bit." Carol nodded, not noticing my confusion. "It's good that you get along. You know, not everyone gets along so well with their in-laws." If only she knew. The next 2 days turned into real torture. I avoided Carol as much as I could, stayed late at work, tried not to be alone with her. She, of course, noticed the changes in my behavior. "Mike, is everything okay?" she asked on the third evening. "You've been strange lately." I realized I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to tell the truth, no matter how terrible it was. "Carol, we need to talk," I said, feeling my heart ready to jump out of my chest. We sat in the living room. Carol looked at me with anxiety and expectation. I opened my mouth, but couldn't utter a word. "Mike, you're scaring me," she said. "What happened?" I took a deep breath. "Carol, I did something terrible. At the corporate party, At that moment, the phone rang. Carol looked at the screen. "It's Mom," she said. "Wait a second." I froze. Could Linda have decided to tell everything herself? "Hi, Mom," Carol said. "Yes, he's home. What? You want to talk to both of us? Now?" My heart was ready to stop. Carol put the phone on speaker. "Mike, Carol!" Linda's voice sounded tense. "I need to tell you something. It's about the corporate party." I closed my eyes, preparing for the worst. "The thing is—" Linda paused. "I lost my wedding ring at the party. Mike, could you help me find it? Maybe you saw where I took it off." I opened my eyes, not believing my ears. Carol was looking at me curiously. Yes, of course," I mumbled. I'll look." "Thank you, dear," said Linda. "Carol, don't worry, we'll find it." When the call ended, Carol turned to me. "So what did you want to tell me? Something about the corporate party?" I looked at her, not knowing what to do. Linda had given me a chance to fix everything, to forget what happened. But was it right? I started but fell silent again. "Mike," Carol took my hand, "I see something's bothering you. Please tell me." I looked into her eyes, full of love and trust, and I realized I couldn't lie to her. Even if it would destroy our family, even if she would hate me, she deserved to know the truth. "Carol," I said, gathering all my courage, "something terrible happened at the corporate party. Your mom and I—" And then the doorbell rang. The doorbell interrupted my confession. Carol stood up to open it while I remained sitting, feeling a mix of relief and disappointment. "Mom!" I heard Carol's surprised voice. "What are you doing here?" Linda entered the living room, looking both worried and determined. "Sorry for the sudden visit, dear, but we need to talk. All three of us." She sat down next to me on the couch, while Carol settled in the chair opposite, glancing from me to her mother. "What's going on?" she asked. "You've both been acting strange since that corporate party." Linda took a deep breath. "Carol, Mike, I have to confess something to you. What I said about the lost ring, it was a lie. Actually," I held my breath, preparing for the worst. "Actually, I overheard a conversation at the corporate party. A conversation about Mike." Carol and I stared at Linda. "What?" I exhaled. "I heard your boss, Mr. Johnson, talking to someone on the phone. He said he was going to fire you, Mike. Something about company reorganization." Carol gasped, and I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. "But why didn't you tell me right away?" I asked. Linda lowered her eyes. "I didn't know how. I was drunk, confused, and then we ended up in that hotel and everything became even more complicated." "What?" Carol looked from her mother to me. "What hotel? What are you talking about?" I realized it was time for the whole truth. "Carol," I began, taking her hand, "after the corporate party, your mom and I ended up in a hotel room. We were very drunk and didn't remember how we got there. In the morning, we woke up in the same bed." Carol pulled her hand away, her face pale. "What? Did you sleep together?" "No," Linda and I exclaimed simultaneously. "At least we don't think so," I added. "We both didn't remember anything and panicked." "We were horrified," Linda continued. "To wake up in such a situation, we didn't know what to think." Carol looked at us with wide eyes. "And you kept silent about this all this time? Suffering, thinking you had betrayed me?" Linda and I nodded, feeling terribly stupid. "But now I remembered something," Linda said. "We did go to the hotel because I was too drunk to get home. Mike, like a true gentleman, helped me get to the room. We were both barely standing. I vaguely remember entering the room," I added. "I think we just collapsed on the bed and instantly fell asleep." "But why were you undressed?" Carol asked, still shocked. I felt my face turning red. "Honestly, I don't remember. Possibly, in our drunk state, we decided it would be more comfortable to sleep that way. It's terribly stupid and irresponsible on our part, but I swear nothing more happened. When we woke up in the morning and saw the situation we were in, we panicked and started thinking the worst," Linda added. "But now, having reconstructed the events of that night in my memory, I'm sure nothing happened between us." A heavy silence fell. Carol looked from me to her mother, trying to process what she had heard. Suddenly, she unexpectedly laughed. At first quietly, then louder and louder. "Oh my God," she exhaled through laughter. "You two idiots! How could you think, oh, Mike, Mom, I adore you, but you're impossible." Her laughter was contagious. First Linda, and then I joined in. We laughed, releasing all the tension of the past few days, all the fears and doubts. When we finally calmed down, Carol became serious. "But what about your job, Mike?" she asked. Is it true they're planning to fire you? I shrugged. I don't know, but if it is, we'll manage. Together. Carol smiled and took Linda's in my hands. Of course we will. We're family, and no misunderstandings will change that. At that moment, I realized that despite all our mistakes and stupidities, I have the most important thing, a loving family. And this is worth all the jobs in the world. You know what? Linda suddenly said. Let's drink to never getting into such ridiculous situations again. We laughed and went to the kitchen for glasses. Many challenges lay ahead of us, but now I knew we would face them together. Falling asleep that night next to Carol, I thought about how one misunderstanding nearly destroyed everything dear to me, and how the truth, no matter how scary it may seem, is always better than any lie or speculation, even if these speculations are just a product of our imagination and fears. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.